Six Japanese fighters circle above. A lone Allied bomber limps through the sky, wings torn, one engine trailing smoke. The crew expects the kill shot any second, but the pilot does something that breaks every rule in the manual. He throttles down, slows the aircraft to a near stall. The enemy fighters overshoot, confused, their formation breaking apart in midair. What happened next would be studied in flight schools for decades. If you find these stories of courage and strategy inspiring, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us keep these historical legacies alive. New Guinea, 1943. The sky above the Coral Sea is not romantic. It smells of aviation fuel and burnt rubber. The heat inside a B-25 Mitchell bomber at 12,000 FT turns the cockpit into a sweatbox. Radio chatter crackles with static and panic. Below the jungle stretches endless and green, swallowing wreckage without ceremony. This is the 5th Air Force operating under General George Kenney. They fly long missions over water with no margin for error. If your engines fail, you ditch. If you ditch, you disappear. The Japanese control the skies in pockets, and their Zero fighters are faster, more agile, and flown by pilots trained since childhood. American bomber crews are losing planes at a rate that keeps intelligence officers awake at night. The math is simple and brutal. Every mission costs machines and men. Replacements arrive weekly, fresh-faced and undertrained. Some last 3 sorties, some last 1. Into this grinder steps a pilot named Jay Zemmer Jr. He does not look like a warrior, tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the humidity. A graduate of MIT with a degree in civil engineering, he speaks in careful sentences as if every word has been triplet checked for structural integrity. His crewmates call him Jay behind his back. Some call him the bookworm. Zima reads obsessively. While others play cards or write letters home, he sits in the corner of the barracks with technical manuals, after-action reports, and translated Japanese flight doctrine. He sketches diagrams in the margins. He asks questions that irritate his commanding officers. Questions like, why do we always dogfight on their terms? What if we stop trying to outrun them? He does not fit the mold. Fighter pilots are supposed to be cocky, instinctive, aggressive. Zemer is none of these. He calculates, he hesitates, he second guesses. This makes him dangerous in the eyes of the brass, not to the enemy, but to himself. They reassign him again and again. He flows between squadrons like a spare part no one wants to install. He flies co-pilot missions, fills in for the sick, and racks up hours without ever commanding his own crew. It is a quiet form of exile. The war is full of men like him, competent enough to keep around, too odd to promote. Then something shifts. Zemmer starts volunteering for missions no one else will take. Reconnaissance flights, long solo runs deep into enemy airspace with outdated planes and skeleton crews. Photo mapping, intelligence gathering. The jobs where you come back with data or you don't come back at all. He assembles a crew of misfits, men who have also been cycled out, overlooked, or written off. A bombardier with malaria scars. A navigator who once crash-landed in the ocean and swam 5 miles to shore. A gunner who refused a direct order and got busted down in rank. They trust Zemer because he does not waste their lives on bravado. He strips down a beaten B-25, reinforces the gun positions, and adds an extra forward-facing cannon. He runs fuel calculations down to the gallon. He briefs his crew not with slogans, but with math. If we burn fuel at this rate, we have 17 minutes over target. If we take fire here, we divert here. If the engine quits, we glide this far. It is not inspiring, it is accurate. On June 16, 1943, Zemmer and his crew are handed a mission that everyone knows is a death sentence. Fly north to Bougainville, deep in Japanese-held territory. Photograph enemy airfields and shipping lanes. Expect heavy resistance, no fighter escort, no backup. The operation is considered so dangerous that it is classified as voluntary. Zemer accepts it without hesitation. His crew agrees to go, not because they are brave, because they trust his calculations. If you want more such stories, like and subscribe so these lives aren't forgotten. Jay Zemer Jr. was born in 1918 in Carlilele, Pennsylvania. His father was a career military officer. His mother played piano and read poetry. The house smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. Dinner conversation revolved around logic, puzzles, and engineering problems. Jay learned early that precision mattered more than volume. He attended Mias High School in Maine. Not popular, not bullied, simply invisible. He joined the debate team and the science club. He built model airplanes with obsessive attention to scale and weight distribution. Teachers described him as meticulous. Classmates described him as odd. He entered MIT in 1936, studied civil engineering, spent weekends at the library instead of football games, graduated in 1940 with decent grades and no clear direction. The world was tilting toward war, but Zemer was too tall for the standard cockpit and too quiet for command consideration. He enlisted anyway, passed flight training, not at the top of his class, not at the bottom. Instructors noted his technical aptitude, but questioned his aggression. One evaluation called him hesitant under simulated combat stress. Another flagged him for overanalysis. He was assigned to bomber duty, then shuffled again. Some pilots wore their reassignments like scars. Zemer treated each one like a research opportunity. He studied how different squadrons operated. He noted what worked and what got people killed. He kept a notebook. His crewmates noticed something strange. Zemer never panicked. Even when an engine caught fire over the Bismarck Sea, even when flak tore a hole in the fuselage the size of a dinner plate, he would narrate the problem aloud clinically, like a surgeon calling out instruments. Oil pressure dropping, altitude loss at 200 ft per minute, trim compensating. It unnerved some men. It reassured others. There was no hysteria in his voice, just data. Zemer also noticed things, small things, like how Japanese fighters always attacked from the same angles, like how anti-aircraft fire followed predictable patterns based on altitude and speed, like how enemy pilots hesitated when a bomber behaved unpredictably. He began testing small variations, flying slightly slower on approach, altering attack runs by 30 seconds, changing altitude in increments that broke the gunner's rhythm. Nothing dramatic, nothing that violated orders, just marginal adjustments, and his crew started coming home. The statistics were subtle, but real. Zemer's missions had a lower casualty rate, fewer hits, cleaner exits. Other pilots dismissed it as luck. Zemer dismissed it as probability. He did not boast. He kept refining. By mid-1943, Zemer had flown more than 40 missions. He was still a captain, still overlooked, still the bookworm, but his crew was loyal in a way that transcended rank. They knew he would not waste them. He would not showboat. He would calculate their survival and execute it. That loyalty would be tested on the morning of June 16th, when they climbed into a battered B-25 and pointed it toward Bougainville, knowing the odds were not in their favor, but trusting that Zemer had already done the math. The problem facing the 5th Air Force in 1943 was not just tactical, it was mathematical. American bombers were being shot down faster than they could be replaced. Japanese fighters, particularly the Mitsubishi A6M0, dominated close-range engagements. The Zero was lighter, faster in turns, and flown by pilots with years of combat experience. American doctrine relied on speed and altitude. Fly high, drop bombs, fly home. Simple, except it was not working. Zeros climbed faster than expected. They coordinated attacks with brutal efficiency. They exploited blind spots. American gunners could not track them. Fighter escorts were stretched thin across thousands of miles of ocean. Bomber crews were on their own. Intelligence officers studied after action reports and found a grim pattern. When bombers encountered enemy fighters, survival depended on two things: luck and firepower. Maneuvering rarely helped. Bombers were too heavy, too slow. Dogfighting was suicide. So the doctrine became maintain speed, stay in formation, rely on defensive guns, do not deviate. But men kept dying. Commanders tried everything. They added more guns. They altered flight paths. They scheduled missions at different times. Nothing changed the fundamental equation. A Zero could outmaneuver a bomber, period. Some pilots tried wild, evasive tactics, diving, banking hard, spiraling. Most crashed or stalled out. A few survived and were grounded for recklessness. The message was clear. Do not experiment. Follow procedure. Accept the losses. Zemer read the reports differently. He noticed that the worst casualties occurred during the chase. After the bombing run, when crews were heading home, Zeros would pursue and pick them apart from behind. The bombers would try to outrun them. They could not. The fighters would sit in the tail blind spot and fire until something exploded. Every manual said the same thing: maximize throttle, get distance, pray. Zemer saw a flaw in that logic. If you cannot outrun them and you cannot outturn them, what is left? He started thinking about energy states. A zero at high speed has momentum. It takes time to slow down, time to adjust. If a bomber suddenly decelerated, the fighter would overshoot. Not by much. Maybe 2 or 3 seconds, but in combat, 2 seconds is an eternity. He sketched it out. If you reduce throttle at the exact moment a zero committed to an attack run, the fighter would shoot past. The zero pilot would have to pull up, bleed, speed, reposition. During that window, your gunners would have a clear shot. It was textbook physics. It was also insane. Slowing down in combat violated every instinct. Pilots are trained to equate speed with survival. Throttling down while under attack felt like surrender. Worse, it required perfect timing. Too early and the zero adjusts. Too late and you take fire. The margin for error was non-existent. Zemer pitched the idea to his squadron commander. The response was blunt, dismissed. Slowing down would make them an easier target. It would destabilize the aircraft. It would cause a stall. The idea was filed under dangerous nonsense. Zemer did not argue. He simply stopped talking about it. But he did not stop thinking. June 16th, 1943. Dawn comes slow over Dudora airfield. The jungle hums with insects. Ground crews move in silence, checking fuel lines and patching bullet holes with aluminum tape. Zemer's B-25 sits at the end of the runway, older and heavier than the rest. It has been written off twice. It should not still be flying. The mission brief is short. Fly north to Buawa, a small island near Bougainville. Photograph Japanese airstrips and harbor installations. Return. Expected enemy contact high. Expected survival rate not discussed. Zemer walks the perimeter of the plane. He checks the gun mounts personally. He reviews fuel calculations with his navigator. He briefs the crew in his usual monotone. 17 minutes over target. If we take fire, we head east toward open water. If we lose an engine, we glide to this coordinate. No one asks what happens if they lose 2 engines. They take off at Oro, 400 hours. The sky is still dark. Zemer flies low to avoid radar. The ocean below is black and featureless. Radio silence. No fighter escort. Just the drone of engines and the faint smell of hydraulic fluid. By 0600, they reach the target area. The sun rises over Bua. Zemer climbs to photo altitude. The bombardier begins snapping images. Japanese installations spread below like a blueprint. Airstrips, fuel depots, transport ships. Then the first zero appears. It rises from below fast and angled, the morning sun glinting off its wings. Then another. Then 4 more. 6 in total. A full hunter group. The radio crackles. Rear gunner reports contact. Zemer acknowledges. He maintains course. The photo run is not finished. 45 seconds remaining. The zeros circle, probing. They do not attack immediately. They are coordinated, disciplined. They wait for the bomber to break formation, to panic, to run. That is when they strike. Zemer finishes the photo run. He banks east. Full throttle. Standard procedure. The zeros close in. The first burst of cannon fire rips through the tail section. Alarms scream. Hydraulic pressure drops. The rear gunner returns fire, but the zero is already gone, looping back for another pass. Zemer watches the formation. He counts their spacing. He measures their approach angles. He notes their speed. They are setting up a rolling attack one after another. Textbook and textbook means predictable. The second zero dives from above. Zemer holds course, waits. The fighter closes to 400 YD, 300, 250. Then Zemer does what no one expects. He cuts throttle. The bomber lurches. The zero screams past, overshooting by a dozen yards. The top gunner tracks it, firing a sustained burst. Tracers walk across the zero's fuselage. Smoke pours from its engine. It spirals down, trailing fire. The other zeros hesitate, confused. Bombers do not slow down. They run. This one just stopped running. Zemmer does it again. A Zero commits to a stern attack. Zemmer throttles down, drops 10 degree in a flap. The fighter overshoots. The waist gunner opens fire, hits. The Zero breaks off, trailing smoke. Now the enemy is uncertain. Their attacks become erratic. They try different angles. Zemmer varies his response. Sometimes he slows, sometimes he drops altitude, sometimes he throttles up at the last second, throwing off their timing. It is not dogfighting, it is disruption. The Zeros burn fuel, they reposition, they overshoot, they take fire from angles they did not anticipate. One by one, they disengage. By the time Zemmer crosses back into Allied airspace, 4 Zeros have been driven off, 2 are confirmed damaged. The bomber is shot full of holes. The hydraulics are failing. One engine is stuttering, but the crew is alive. Zemmer lands the plane on one engine and no brakes. It skids off the runway into the mud. Silence. Then the hatch opens. The crew climbs out, shaking. Ground crews stare. The plane looks like it flew through a sawmill. Over 500 bullet holes. The tail section is shredded. The cockpit canopy is cracked. Blood streaks the floor. Zemmer is wounded. So is the bombardier. So is the navigator. They refused to abort. They completed the mission, they brought the photos home, and they survived something that should have killed them. The photographs from BUA are developed within hours. Intelligence officers spread them across a map table. The images are sharp, clear. They show airfield layouts, fuel storage, troop concentrations, the kind of intelligence that costs lives to obtain. But the real debrief happens in a medical tent. Zemmer lies on a cot, bandaged and pale. A flight surgeon checks his wounds. 2 bullet fragments removed from his legs, shrapnel in his shoulder. He is lucky to be conscious. A colonel arrives. He wants to know what happened, how a single bomber fought off 6 Zeros and made it home. Zemmer explains calmly, methodically. He describes the throttle reductions, the timing, the disruption of the enemy's energy state. The colonel listens. He does not interrupt. When Zemmer finishes, the tent is silent. Then the colonel asks, "Did you plan this?" Zemmer nods. He has been thinking about it for months. The colonel leaves. He does not say whether Zemmer will be court-martialed or commended. The line between innovation and insubordination is thin. 3 days later, the answer comes. Zemmer is awarded the Medal of Honor. So is his bombardier. The rest of the crew receives Distinguished Service Crosses. The citations are dry and factual. They reference courage under fire. They do not mention the throttle trick, not officially. But pilots talk. Word spreads through the squadrons. Zemmer's maneuver is analyzed, debated, tested. Some dismiss it as a fluke, others see the logic. A few try it in combat. It works, not every time. Timing is everything. But when executed correctly, the throttle reduction creates a window, a gap, a chance. Flight instructors begin incorporating it into advanced training, not as doctrine, as an option, a tool. Something to consider when speed alone is not enough. Zemmer does not fly combat missions again. His injuries are too severe. He is reassigned stateside. He spends the rest of the war training pilots, teaching them to think, not just react, to see physics in the chaos. He never boasts. He never claims to have changed anything. But the men he trains carry his lesson forward. They survive situations that should have killed them. They come home. They teach others. The throttle trick becomes part of the invisible curriculum, not written in manuals, passed down through debriefs and barroom conversations. A small piece of cunning in a war full of brute force. By the end of 1943, bomber losses in the Pacific begin to decline. Not dramatically, not everywhere, but the trend is measurable. Intelligence analysts attribute it to better fighter coverage, improved aircraft, more experienced crews. Some credit goes to tactics, including one small strange adjustment in how pilots handle close-quarter fighter attacks. It is never called the Zemmer maneuver. It is simply known, understood, applied. Captured Japanese pilots interrogated after the war, mentioned confusion during certain engagements. American, bombers that behaved unpredictably, targets that suddenly slowed or changed speed at critical moments. It disrupted attack rhythms. It created uncertainty. In aerial combat, uncertainty kills aggression. Zemmer's mission to Buhua yields more than photographs. It shifts thinking, not policy, not doctrine, but something subtler. It plants a seed. The idea that survival is not just about firepower or speed. It is about timing, disruption, calculation. Other pilots begin experimenting. Small variations, throttle adjustments, altitude changes, evasive patterns that break enemy expectations. Not all work, some are disastrous, but enough succeed to prove the principle. You do not have to be faster, you have to be harder to predict. The 5th Air Force logs over 10,000 combat sorties in 1943. The survival rate improves by 4% over the previous year. 4% sounds small. It represents hundreds of lives, thousands of hours, entire crews that make it home. Zimmer's crew, the misfits and cast-offs, become legends in their own quiet way. They do not give interviews, they do not write memoirs. But other crews know their names, know what they did. The plane they flew, tail number 41, the 301 Phi Mami, is scrapped after the war. Too damaged, too old. No one thinks to preserve it. It is melted down and turned into something else. But the lesson survives. Jay Zimmer returns to civilian life in 1945. He settles in New England, he works as an engineer, he designs bridges and water systems, he marries, he raises children. He does not talk about the war unless asked, and even then his answers are brief. He attends a few veteran reunions. He shakes hands. He smiles quietly when old crewmates retell the story of Buha. He never corrects them, never adds details. He lets the myth grow on its own. He dies in 2007 at the age of 88. His obituary mentions the Medal of Honor. It mentions MIT. It does not mention the throttle trick. Most people who read it do not know what he really contributed. But in flight schools, decades later, instructors still teach energy management. They still talk about unpredictability as a defensive tool. They still drill pilots on the importance of timing over raw speed. The language has changed. The principle has not. Zimmer's insight was not that bombers could dogfight. It was that they could disrupt, that a moment of calculated slowness could be more valuable than blind speed. That survival sometimes requires doing the opposite of what feels safe. He proved that intellect is a weapon, that curiosity can outmaneuver instinct, that a bookworm with a slide rule can outlast a squadron of aces. The war produced countless heroes. Most earned their glory through firepower or sacrifice. Zimmer earned his through physics, through patience, through the stubborn belief that math could keep people alive. He never sought fame, he sought answers. And in the process, he gave his crew and hundreds of others a chance to come home. His plane is gone. His name fades, but the idea endures. The idea that in war, as in life, the smartest move is not always the fastest. Sometimes it is the one no one expects. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this historical deep dive, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which historical figure we should cover next.